Councillors Allison, Anderson, Brown, Carmichael, Chalmers, Clark, Convery. We don't have Councillor Cooper in the meeting at the moment. We have present Councillors Cowan, Devlin, Fagan, Ferguson-Miller. We have apologies from Councillor Frame and Councillor Johnson-Dempsey substituting. We have present Councillors Hamilton, Kerr, Lambie, Logan, Loudon, McAllen. We have apologies from Councillor McClyman and Councillor Cowie substituting. We have apologies from Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Handybody substituting. And we have present Councillors McLachlan, Nelson, Ray, Razak, Robb, Ross, Shearer and Walker. And I'll hand back to the Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I come to item 1, which is declarations of interest? Are there any declarations of interest? I don't see any. So can we come to item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting? Are there any questions from the minutes of the previous meeting? I don't see any. So can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting? Thank you. And I come now to item 3, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is our Revenue Budget Monitoring Report that's taking us to the 29th of December. Also included in this report is our probable outturn. As is usual at this time of the year, we bring back what we expect our year-end position to be. It's a detailed report in front of you, but we have provided an executive summary at section 4, which I will take you through. We also have included an appendix to the details of transfers to reserves that we will propose as part of this paper. I'll refer to that a number of times through the next 5 minutes or so. This paper also provides an update on our housing revenue account position as well. So if I take you to section 4 of the report, the outturn position for the Council is shown in table 1 on page 14. There are commitments that we have to take into account, and these are reflected in the middle column of figures in table 1, which are proposed transfers to reserves. And that leaves a position in terms of our outturn after these transfers of £3.579 million of an underspend. There are 4 areas that we report on that make up this underspend, and they are detailed in the table. We have our resource position, we have our loan charges, we have corporate items, which picks up other budget lines that aren't caught by resource and loan charges, and also council tax. And I'll take you through each of those individually. So section 4.4 picks up the position for resources. All resources are reporting a combined underspend position of £926,000 after transfers to reserves. So as I said, these transfers to reserves that are proposed as part of this paper are picked up in Appendix 2 of the report. On page 15, each of the resources positions are summarised. So community and enterprise resources are showing an underspend of £348,000. And that's after transfers to reserves in terms of commitments around spend on Frontline First, on the Strategic Waste Fund, and also upgrade to air conditioning for refuse collection vehicles. Education is showing a break-even position after proposed transfers to reserves for planned pupil equity fund expenditure and additional support for learning spend, which will be incurred by the end of the school year, which falls into the next financial year. Finance and corporate resources are showing an underspend of £578,000, and that's after transfers to reserves in relation to premiums on the insurance fund. The underspend in finance and corporate resources is primarily due to empty property relief, which is demand-led. There's also an anticipated underspend of £40,000 on community grants this year, and it's proposed that that is transferred to food banks, and that was previously suggested at the Executive Committee on the 3rd of December. Payments will be made to constituted organisations in the third sector to support our priority of tackling poverty. Housing and technical resources are showing a break-even position, and that's after money being set aside for the First Stop accommodation project within homelessness, which has previously been reported to committee, and social work is covered at 4.9 of the report. Again, we're showing a break-even position for social work after the proposed transfers to reserves. Within this is the IGB budget for adults and older people services, and we're including a transfer to reserves of £500,000 for transformation in residential care, and also a contribution of £750,000, which will further augment support for young people who transition from children and family services into adult services over the next 2 years. This position also includes £1.762 million, which is in relation to the budget delegated to the IGB. These are monies that are part of the Council's contribution to the IJB and is effectively an underspend on that fund. As we have done in the past, we're proposing that that non-recurring underspend is held by the IJB and is available for use by them going forward. The social work non-delegated services, which includes children and families, is also reporting a break-even position after transfers to reserves. That includes, transfers to reserves in relation to the pressures that we've reported previously around children and families to assist with their budget recovery plan into future years. If I pick up at 413, this is the second area of our probable outturn report, and that's on our loan charges. And we're reporting an in-year underspend of just over £2.1 million, and that reflects the impact of timing of borrowing for our capital programme. The third area of our probable outturn is our corporate items, and as I said earlier, this is areas of budget that doesn't get picked up as part of our resource budget or our loan charge budget. There's a net underspend of £422,000 in that area, and that's after taking into account our known commitments, and they're detailed there at 4.14 around service concessions, around the packaging extended producer responsibility, and around our Central Energy Efficiency Fund, renewable heat initiative and feed-in tariff income. The main area of underspend in that area is due to additional procurement savings that have been made through the year and will contribute to permanently towards budget savings going forward. And finally, at 4.15, we have our position on council tax, and there's a small over-recovery of council tax of £130,000 this year. So taking all of that into account, we're left with a net underspend of £3.5 million, and we're proposing at 4.17 how that can be utilised. We're proposing that £1 million could be transferred to reserves to allow us to provide financial support towards the response to the questions posed by the Marmot Initiative that this committee has heard of previously. This £1 million will allow us to contribute towards costs of taking forward activity, which might include staffing and implementation costs. We're also proposing that £40,000 be set aside to support Winter Wishes programme within children and families, which has run successfully over recent years. We're proposing that £100,000 be transferred to reserves to progress works around commercial space, and that's in line with the paper later on in the agenda. And we have £400,000 that we're proposing could be set aside to help contribute towards the work of the third sector review to continue the medium grants allocation beyond 26-27. £200,000 is available in that year, and £400,000 would allow that to continue for another 2 years. That leaves £2.039 million of an underspend, and we're suggesting that that could be transferred to reserves for future budget considerations. I'd just like to remind members again that Appendix 2 of the report covers the proposed transfers to reserves, which we'll be looking for approval for, and also housing probable outturn is covered in Section 6 of the report, and we're reporting a break-even for housing. The rest of the report gives a bit more detail around the areas that I've summarised for you, but if I take you back to the recommendations, we're asking that the previously approved transfers to reserves are noted, that those proposed transfers to reserves that are detailed in Appendix 2 be approved, that the Council's outturn underspend of £3.579 million be noted, that the proposal around the underspend of £40,000 from community grants be transferred to food banks be approved, that the non-recurring underspend of £1.762 million in the Integrated Joint Board delegated budget be retained by them and held in reserves for their future years' use be approved, and that the underspend of £3.579 million for 25-26, as set out in Section 4.17, be approved, and that the projected position on housing revenue account of break-even be noted. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. You'll see that an amendment has been circulated. I'm going to come to Kirsten Robb in just a second on that. Can I ask if there are any questions on the paper itself? Could you please indicate now? And can I come to Maureen Devlin?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to, I'm really quite pleased to see recommendation 4, because every area committee, there's always a discussion about the equal monies that goes to the different groups and the funds that's left over. So it's really good to see that going to across the whole of South Lanarkshire to the food banks, especially when we've got the times that we're living in. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Could I come to Kirsten then? Kirsten?
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Thanks to your considerations for this amendment. Just like town centres, country parks and commercial properties that have had or will have feasibility studies, I think it's important to move forward and try and carve out some funds for the next stage of heat networks. And in the Cambuslang case, it's the first stage. This will allow us to be in a good place for when the Glasgow City Region retrofit project comes forward, because we then will have the shovel-ready projects to take advantage of funding. So just to give you a wee quick background, the Council is committed to exploring heat networks through the LHES strategy and the estate strategy. They're a good way, more energy efficient, reliable, cheaper, and can integrate with renewable energy when that comes on in the future as well. 3 feasibility studies will be due to report in the end of March, and we'll hopefully be able to take them forward with these funds to the next stage as well, hopefully with match from Scottish Government, but backed up, if we don't get that match, by our own pot of renewable heat incentive payments and feed-in tariffs. And then there's the new project in Cambuslang as well, which will give options for that as well. Certainly some of the areas in my ward which won't benefit from this, but that's fine. People are in fuel poverty quite a lot in the high rises, so I think anything that can help them, including heat networks, would be a good solution. So just ask if you'd consider this. Happy to answer any questions people have got on it.
Okay, can I throw this one open again? I'm not seeing any questions, so can I say from my point of view, I think this is very good work that the Council is undertaking in a number of communities, and it's, as Kirsten rightly makes the point, that we're hopeful that there are funding streams that become available that allow us to progress these schemes. There is a potential funding gap that I think the Council would be wise to address, either through the budget process or now. And on that basis, I think on behalf of the administration, I'm happy to accept the amendment. With that amendment, are we agreed to the paper as amended?
Agreed.
Yeah, we're agreed. Okay, thank you very much. I'll come now to item 4, which is the Capital Budget Monitoring Report, and come back to Jackie Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our capital monitoring report, taking us again to the 29th of December. At section 4.1, we're reporting that our general fund capital programme is £67.7 million. We're not proposing any adjustments to that in this paper. Point to note at 4.2 is that £20,000 within the capital programme of local action fund monies for Ward 7 has been agreed with local members that these funds will now be spent on Darwin Road Play Park. At 4.3 of the report, we're reporting on some external funding that we've been advised of from the Walk Wheel Cycle Trust, which was previously Sustrans. They've advised that we will receive £810,000, and that's for improvements along the NCN 75 Clyde Walkway Path and also traffic signals at St Stephen's Avenue and East Kilbride Road crossing in Rutherglen. Now, given the timing of this award, what we're suggesting is that we will add that budget to the 26-27 capital programme. However, any spend that we can achieve for the remainder of this financial year will be managed within the funding available. Also noting at 4.4, our proposal to maximise the use of space within this building. This is the first floor former coffee shop that we will bring back into productive use, turn it into a meeting area. That will cost £50,000, and that will be funded within the existing budgets within the capital programme. Our forecast for the year is covered at 4.7 of the report. We're looking to maximise spend across the capital programme, but we are reporting that 2 projects where spend will fall into 26-27. They are the East Kilbride Town Centre project, where the demolition costs have actually come in less than anticipated, and also Hamilton Junctions, where the works have been programmed to begin in spring 2026. At 4.11, I've provided an update on the Leisure and Culture Transformation Fund programme to illustrate the good progress that's been made this year, with £10 million of spend expected by the end of the year. We've provided some physical progress on projects that have been undertaken. That includes fitness studio modernisation and gym upgrades across the area, including John Wright Sports Centre, Carluke Leisure Centre, Hamilton Water Palace and Lanark Lifestyles, as well as library Reprovisions at Hill House in Ernack, Green Hills, Blantyre and Forth. We've also seen pitch replacements at White Moss Recreation Area. We've seen upgrades at Colburn Leisure Centre, toilet upgrades and lift replacement at Hamilton Palace, and also upgrades at the Murray Owen Centre. Works continuing on other projects, including Calder Glen Country Park and the conservatory roof there, and also changing in showers in Blantyre Leisure Centre, and upgrade works at the Memorial Hall in Lanark and the toilets at Chatelet. There's also a continuation of the work that has been happening across fitness studios in the area, and works commenced at Dolan Aquin Centre, Blackwood Community Wing and the Lifestyles in Eastfield. So really positive feedback on that programme of investment. The Housing Capital Programme is detailed at section 5 of the report, and we have a programme of £87.7 million for the year. Again, we're looking to maximise spend and expect that we'll be able to spend to that level and maximise our external funding. To take you back to the recommendations in the report, we're asking that the position for General Fund and Housing Capital Programmes to be noted, and that the £20,000 of Ward 7 Local Action Fund monies be allocated to the Darwin Road Play Park be approved, and that finally that the programme continues to be monitored by the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report for Jackie? And can I come to Robert Brown?
Thanks very much. I was looking at the housing programme then. Obviously, there's quite a lot of movement in terms of Scottish Government grant and things of that kind. And I noticed the comment in 5.3 about the reduction in spend as a result of this will be offset by an opportunity to accelerate the housing investment programme on external fabrics and energy efficiency projects. I just wondered in that context whether there was any potential for the hold-up in Spring Hall in my ward, which was getting a number of projects each year, to be able to move forward a little bit under that heading. I know it's something I've had correspondence about already. Is there any potential for that under that heading, or am I misunderstanding its potential?
Okay, maybe Jackie or Stephen, somebody want to take that up? Jackie in the first instance? No? Stephen?
I was going to offer, I don't know the details of that specifically, Councillor Brown, but I'm very happy to speak to Sharon Egan just to see what those projects are that are being brought forward, and specifically on the project you mentioned, we can find out some details for you on when that's planned.
That's great, thank you.
Stephen?
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Brown, similar to Jackie, happy to look into that. But what we would say is that we've got a lot of where there's any slippage in the new build programme this year, it's in relation to a lot of projects that are already on site. We're making very significant progress in the delivery of the over 1,000 new build units by March 2027. We've got an awful lot of projects on site just now. We're seeing a lot of sites that we'll see lots of completions, and what we'll see is a lot of that money is already identified into next year. But happy to look at that particular project for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And for my own part, can I just add, as I think I've said before, as maybe not a frequent enough user of South Lanarkshire's gyms, I have to say the improvements across the sports centres and the John Wrights in particular, I think have been absolutely superb. So well done all involved. Can I bring us back to the recommendations and ask us to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. Could I come now to item 5, which is the update on funding, and we're still with Jackie Taylor. Jackie.
Thank you. So just the usual report on updates to funding. We have in this paper £1.159 million of additional capital funding that's been identified. If I take you to the appendix, the details are in there. We've got £149,000. That's on housing first capital funding. That's to increase the availability of tenancies for people with multiple complex needs. We've got 2 lines that are in relation to the Walk, Wheel, Cycle Trust monies that I mentioned a second ago. 600,000 for the NCN 75 Clyde Walkway and £210,000 for the St Stephen's Avenue East Kilbride Road crossing in Rutherglen. And then at the bottom of the page, the £200,000 we were expecting from Sports Scotland around Lark Hall Leisure Centre, that's already included within the overall budget for that project. So just to take you back to the recommendations, we're just asking that the additional funding is noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report? I don't see any, so can we just agree to... Oh, sorry, we have one question. Katie Loudon.
Thanks very much, Chair. Sorry, I think it was my button wasn't being very responsive there. It was just a quick one on page 39, just to welcome the funding from Walk Wheel Cycle Trust, which is more difficult to say than Sustrans, I've got to say. Particularly the funding for the improvements along the Clyde cycle path and the work at the bottom of the Carmyle Viaduct fork in my ward. There was an awful lot of work that was done when Sustrans were first proposing to refurbish the viaduct, an awful lot of work that was done with the community about what they wanted that to look like in terms of lighting, planting, the pathway and so on, because there are historic concerns about safety in that area, and there were concerns about it, about vandalism continuing and that it being well lit and so on. So it's just to look for a bit of reassurance that all of that work, because it is a good few years old now, is still going to be taken cognisance of when this investment is taken forward.
Okay, Kevin, and I should welcome Kevin here, as it is Kevin Carr, his first outing as the Director of Community and Enterprise. Over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your point. Councillor Loudon, yeah, that's certainly something we'll look into with the new investment. Just given the timing of the investment, we'll be looking at it for the next financial year, but we'll certainly take into account any of the previous consultations.
Great, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. There are no other questions, so can I draw us back to the recommendations, and can we agree to note the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed, thank you. And I'll come now to item 6, which are recommendations referred by the Housing and Technical Resources Committee. I'm going to ask Stephen Gibson to speak to this report. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to request approval of the recommendations referred to the Executive Committee by the Housing and Technical Resource Committee, and that comes from a special meeting of the committee on the 21st of January 2026. The background's in the form of a minute of the Housing and Technical Resource Committee, and you can find that in section 3 of the report. Just to summarise that, in terms of the capital position, this report confirms that based on the revenue estimates for 26-27, which are of course prepared in line with the usual 30-year business plan, the proposed capital programme for 2026-27 is £90.434 million. In relation to the rent increase, the minute confirms that in 2026-27 is year 3 of that 3-year multi-year agreement we've had with tenants and residents, and that we're proposing a rent increase of 6.5%. Halfway down, page 42 talks about what we're calling a new build premium, and this refers to the rent for new build properties and advises that to reflect the energy efficiency of new build homes, new build properties let after the 1st of April this year with a 15% premium added, which replaces the previous approach, or the current approach I should say, of £10 per week. Regarding affordability, when compared to the rents charged by other local authorities in Scotland and comparing and contrasting us to our other peers in South Lanarkshire, we charge affordable rents. We've got the 8th lowest rent of all local authorities in Scotland, and once again we will be charging the lowest rent of every social landlord in South Lanarkshire. In terms of the housing supply programme, the committee noted that although funding for 26-27 is still to be confirmed, we're basing this on the 25-26 allocation, and we've confirmed that when further information comes available, we'll present that to committee, but we're still moving forward with a healthy programme next year. Page 43 summarises the discussions we've had about consultation process, and this was undertaken, and it's a crucial role played by the Budget Scrutiny Group and the Tenant Participation Coordination Group. And just mirroring the thanks by the Chair to the tenants' representatives of the Budget Scrutiny Group and the Tenant Participation Coordination Group, I'd like to thank them as well for the role they played and the continued help and support they give us to build the budget and give that voice to tenants and residents when we're preparing the budget and making recommendations to you. So I can take you back to the recommendations. The Executive Committee is asked to approve 5 recommendations in Section 2, which include referring these to the full Council for approval. And that's that the proposed increase of 6.5% be applied for 26-27. The proposed rent increases in charges as applied to the provision of close cleaning, laundry services be endorsed. That the proposed 15% premium be added to all new build rents charged let and that will be properties let on or after the 1st of April 26. That based on this rent increase of 6.5%, the capital budget for next year will be £90.434 million, and that the recommendations be referred to the Council for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could you indicate now? Could I come to Councillor Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just to say thank you for the continued investment in our housing stock and for the work that you've been doing, specifically around about the housing revenue account and the capital programme. However, this is the third consecutive year of rent increases with a further 6.5% rise at a time, I think, when households are still facing the real cost of living pressures. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, can I just ask if there's been any modelling done on the cumulative impact on these increases on low-income households, on those on universal credit, and how confident that you are that the arrears will remain within the 1.3 million provision, and also what tangible service improvements tenants will actually see in return for this 6.5% increase this year? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Stephen?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Councillor Nelson. Yeah, we're very confident that we've got a very good track record compared to our peers on rent recovery and managing rent arrears. We continuously strive to keep our rents as low as possible. We've consulted a lot with tenants in advance of this, and we believe that the rents that we charge will remain to be affordable to our tenants. But taking account of the fact that we are in a cost of living crisis, we have retained the budget for tenancy sustainment, and that's something that we're working actively with to make sure that we avoid people getting into difficulties because of rents. In terms of service improvements, the latest charter returns and all the indicators I have is, again, compared to our previous performance and compared to our peers, we continue to perform in the higher end of the scale. We're doing particularly well across all key performance indicators, and the expectation is that will continue into next year.
Okay. Richard?
Sorry, Chair, just about the improvements that the tenants will actually see for the 6.5%. I don't think you really kind of fully covered that part, Stephen, if you could.
Stephen?
No, in terms of improvements, what we will see is part of the budget, or part of that 6.5% rent increase, will be used to fund the affordable housing supply programme, of which we've got hundreds of units on site this year and completion into next year. So that a large chunk of that money, a large proportion of that money, will go to help to develop and continue the development of our affordable housing supply programme. We have officers who will be linked heavily into tenancy sustainment to make sure that we create and sustain tenancies, and it's not just about building new houses. So I do believe that there's evidence that the 6.5% will, from an operational perspective and from a new build delivery perspective, make real differences to people in South Lanarkshire.
Could I maybe just ask about the kind of existing tenants and what they could expect to see out of the capital programme?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, the capital programme, broadly speaking, it's a 50-50 split between new build and housing investment. So, as I say, a large part of that £90 million will be in the form of creating and developing new build houses for tenants moving into the future. But a substantial part of it is also reinvesting in our own homes. That's not just carrying out repairs, but that's linked to climate change, energy efficiency, external wall insulation, thinking about climate change and reducing fuel poverty. So there's a large part, it's split across two broad areas: protecting and investing in existing homes and building new homes into the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. It was recommendation 3, looking for a little bit more information. 15% of a new build premium based on the fact that they have an increased energy efficiency. How does that compare to the money that a resident would be saving? Is there still a significant benefit? Secondly, you've just highlighted that a lot of the capital funding will be going to improving energy efficiency in our current homes. If the current homes are brought up to the same level of energy efficiency, why are they not paying the premium as well? Just little bit more clarity around what we're doing there.
Stephen?
Which, Councillor Allison, actually these are questions which were asked at the Housing and Technical Resource Committee. In terms of moving forward, we've got an obligation by 2045 to respond to the Scottish Housing Net Zero Standard, and that's something we'll be working on in our modelling. Probably the expectation is that as we move forward and we do bring out all of our houses and we start to retrofit and bring more houses forward to that standard, we might look at reprofiling the rent for these properties at some time in the future, but it's not built into existing modelling. In terms of how the new build properties let after the 1st of April will be affected, at present we charge a rent, an additional rent of £10 per week. What we're talking about is 15% per month. It's not what we believe is by doing that, tenants still get the benefit of some of the savings that we would get from that more energy efficient property. We're not going to push people into fuel poverty as a consequence of doing this.
So tenants will still be better off than what they would have been?
That's the expectation, yes. Compared to an inefficient property, yes.
Just comment, it seems rather strange that we're asking, sorry, the last question, that we're asking social tenants to pay for more social housing. It seems a bit perverse. But social housing is identifying as the less well off, so we're asking them to subsidise the purchase of more houses.
That's how the housing revenue account works, Councillor Allison, where we get substantial grant funding from the Scottish Government, but the HRA is ring-fenced, and the money coming, the part of the money coming to build new houses has always come from the HRA Capital Fund. That's not new, that's in the HRA business plan, and it's the way housing has been financed for a long time now.
Okay. Could I come to Councillor Logan?
Thanks, Chair. Some of the questions that you asked actually answered what I was going to say, but I have to say, I think it's very unfair to say that it's just people who would be potentially in poverty or not well off is going to get a council house, are requiring a council house. I have a weekly surgery, and the people that come through your doors are of varied means and different and things can happen to people that require them maybe to get a council house. And I know that a lot of them are working, and a lot of people, it's just that they can't get on to buying, the buying market, so they require properties. So I think just to say, carte blanche say, it's people who are in need financially would need a council house is actually maybe not just exactly true. And the other point, and I did go through this before and I'll say it again, when we started out here in 1995, but even before that for me, we had houses that had steel framed windows, one fire, basically this and that. We as a council chose to bring those houses up to a certain standard. We have worked for years, and I mean every year, through all our directors to get good heating, good kitchens, double glazing, the cladding in the house, all the various things. And it does show, and people do appreciate it. And over the years, when you're sitting every week getting folk in, that has decreased greatly, the complaints about standards, workmanship or whatever's going on in the houses. The kitchens are really first class. So I think this council can be very proud of the journey that it went from 95 to just now. I think it can be very proud of the journey that it will continue to do. And when you look at or you hear of some of the houses that are getting built, they're superb. I mean, two toilets, sometimes three if there's an ensuite getting put in. So I think we should be very, very proud. And I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. When your complaints drop, because people will come, then that you know that things are moving along quite well. And I can only say again, because I'm always saying it, our staff are second to none, the council staff, and they do a good job. So I think we should think about what we're saying, what we're doing, and housing is for everybody, not just for certain people in our society. And that sometimes causes trouble as well, because people get a mindset about who's going to come into council housing.
Okay, thank you. Stephen?
Yeah, look, thanks for that, Councillor Logan. Yeah, it's just to reaffirm, look, social affordable housing is a tenure of choice. And at times people choose, who might have other alternatives, but sometimes people choose social affordable housing, and that's absolutely right. But just to reaffirm what you're saying, of course, a big part of the programme this year is going to be windows, it's going to be doors, it's going to be new kitchens. You know, there's a lot of things and a lot of investment into our existing houses in the inside and the outside. And as you say, we're very proud of that. Thank you.
Yep. Could I come to David McLaughlin?
Thanks, Chair. I'm referring back to what Stephen mentioned earlier, where I, as Chair, thanked the Tenant Participation Coordination Group. Just as a bit of an education for anybody that doesn't know, this is a group of people who are tenants, and they work very well with officials, as has been intimated, and they were more than happy with the proposals. There was no questions, there was no doubts. They were more than happy because they recognise the fantastic service that they get. And something that Stephen touched on just latterly there, that he didn't mention in his first interjection, that the Home Happening programme is about to start again. So just to repeat also what Stephen said, we're the lowest social landlord in South Lanarkshire, and we're the 8th lowest in Scotland. So I really just don't understand where any complaints or concerns are coming from regarding the rent level, Chair. Thanks very much.
Thank you. If I bring us back then to the recommendations, can I ask, could we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you. I will come now to item 7, which is a paper on a response to industrial market challenges, and Alison Brown is going to speak to this report. Alison.
Good morning. This paper sets out how the Council might respond to the challenges with the industrial market. Property consultants Ryden have undertaken a market analysis of employment, land and property across South Lanarkshire, which was reported to the Community and Enterprise Resources Committee in November 2024. A summary of the findings for each geographical area is set out in section 4 of the report, with the study identifying the following actions: a need to stimulate the refurbishment of existing industrial stock, the creation of development-ready plots, intervention in the market to ensure a new supply of industrial and office premises, and the review of the Shawfield area to explore its potential to host a range of uses. It's also worth highlighting that Glasgow City Region has identified priority sectors for economic growth as high-value manufacturing, laboratory space, research, development and digital and tech, with 25 million funding being available from the Local Innovation Fund for a research and development programme of activity. In response, the Council is currently delivering 2 industrial units at Cathcart Road in Rutherglen at a cost of just over £2 million, and this has been supported by a range of funding sources. The Council is also working in partnership with Clyde Gateway and Scottish Enterprise to deliver Red Tree Labs, which will deliver office, lab space and incubator space. Additional interventions are, however, required, and these are set out in section 6 and also included in Appendix 1. Taking each of these in turn, there is a need to target existing industrial stock. At present, the Council offers limited business grants. However, due to the high cost of retrofit works, there has been limited take-up for this particular area of activity. Consideration should be given to bolstering these grants and targeting retrofit projects. The Council has a portfolio of industrial properties which in some instances are of poor quality and resource intensive. It is suggested that these should be disposed of or demolished to make way for new industrial space or realise a capital receipt for reinvestment. It is recommended that an assessment of these properties is undertaken and a business case developed for their disposal. The Council also has a number of business centres, including Borough House in Rutherglen and Brandon House Business Centre in Hamilton, both of which provide small business space. Whilst these centres provide important start-up office space, they are somewhat dated, require investment and are operationally intensive. The Council has received an approach from a private sector operator who's expressed an interest in taking over the operation and sharing the rent. Alternatively, the Council could consider procuring commercial expertise to manage and develop these centres. And again, it's proposed a business case is prepared to explore these opportunities. There is also a need to create service plots and units. Council-owned land, however, is limited, with only 2 sites currently available at Canderside in Larkhall and Caldwell Side in Lanark. In the case of Caldwell Side, this site has been identified as a potential site for a council depot as part of the depot rationalisation review. In respect of Canderside, whilst there's been very recent market interest in this site, a feasibility study is proposed to better understand the capacity of the site and associated development cost. With limited availability of council-owned land, consideration should be given to acquiring sites from the open market. An initial review of the open market has identified a site at Young Place in Kelvin Industrial Estate in East Kilbride, which is planning consent for 6 industrial units and a guide price of £300,000. It is recommended that officers further engage with property agents to explore this and other opportunities and bring back proposals for consideration. Consideration should also be given to partnership working to secure industrial space, such as with Clyde Gateway and other third parties. Further analysis will also be undertaken for opportunities in the wider rural area, with a report being prepared for the Rural Task Force in due course. It's also worth highlighting the role of the local development plan in securing employment land allocation, with a call for sites anticipated in spring of this year. The funding environment is set out in section 9, but essentially if the council wishes to directly intervene in this market, it is likely that it will have to finance much of the activity directly. This could either be via borrowing or capital funding. Ideally, any capital receipts from the disposal of industrial sites and properties would be recycled to support this programme of investment. In order to develop the projects, a feasibility study funding is required, and today you have agreed as part of agenda item 3 to provide funding for £100,000. The motion approved at full council on the 10th of December now requires officers to bring forward an investment challenge paper, and it's suggested that proposals outlined in this report should be considered as part of this paper. Taking us back to the recommendation, committee is asked to note the summary of the industrial market and that the proposed interventions as set out in Appendix 1 be approved, including the feasibility studies as set out in paragraph 9.6. Thank you.
Okay, can I thank Alison very much for that paper? I think a very comprehensive paper. I just want to pick up a couple of things within it. First of all, we've known about some of these challenges for a long time, but have lacked the finance to be able to address those challenges, and we don't see that the market is necessarily coming forward to address those challenges, albeit there were some encouraging signs within that paper in particular instances. This is an area where previously local government, I think when better resourced, would have been investing. It's certainly an area where partners would have been investing, and I think the kind of economic development landscape in Scotland has changed, and there isn't that same investment that we might have seen 20, 30 years ago in these kinds of areas. There aren't local enterprise companies anymore, for example. So I think this is a challenge that we can't ignore and we can't sit on. It's useful to map out, also it'll be literally map it, well, that felt like a map of South Lanarkshire being developed as we were talking through that paper. But as we map out the challenges, we also have to look for the funding opportunities to help us translate these challenges that we're seeing into solutions. Now, with that said, I invite any questions in the paper. I have a couple already. Could I come to Andrea Cowan?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Alison, for your report. I really just wanted to welcome the £2.1 million investment in Rutherglen. as you know, I'm just going to bang Rutherglen's drum, do a wee advert for it, just to say that it's ideally placed for access, easy access to the motorway network, and I'm sure these units will be snapped up. So any more investment that the council's thinking of, please pour it into Rutherglen. Thank you.
Okay. Can I come to Katie Loudon?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Cowan's comments as well. We were lucky enough to have Clyde's Gateway presenting at our last area committee in Camglen, and see and hear about not only their new developments but their plans for future that are outlined in here as well. In the sort of life science space, looking at specialist labs and so on, lots of really exciting work going on there. And it's not an exaggeration to say that there's been an absolute transformation of that part of Rutherglen, the Shawfield area, over recent years, and it's great to see that that's going to be continuing. And a really interesting part of hearing that presentation from Clyde Gateway was hearing more about their sort of business case behind that, their planning behind that, how they've linked in with that industry. They've identified sort of life science areas and industry, a growth industry in Scotland, which is needing space basically. So when we're looking at possibilities, like we've got outlined at 6.5, where we're looking at like the creation of service plots or units, for example, it would be great to know either just now, or I know that there's a paper coming later in the year after the December meeting, a bit more detail about what sits behind that from our point of view. So how are we determining what the market wants, like the market in the widest terms, and then sort of specific sectors in it, and how are we identifying where the gaps are in terms of type of unit, size of unit, speciality, that kind of thing. Thanks.
Come back to Alison to pick those questions up.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. Yes, I mean, part of the work that we've been doing is not necessarily just unique to South Lanarkshire. We, as part of Glasgow City Region, have been doing a sort of wider piece of work around the region, and hence the point I picked up around that sort of regional priority around research, lab space, etc. So there will be different opportunities for different areas emerging, and in the paper I sort of referenced the work that we need to do with property agents. So we need to understand where the demand is, understand lease breaks, understand opportunities that might not be there now but might be there 2 years from now, and sort of position ourselves as best as we can within that region. So we're trying to get ahead of the market. So that's going to be ever evolving, and then that's why it's really important, you know, to stay close to the market and stay close to agents and analyse that more or less continually. But we'll be doing a lot of that through the business case, and as you say yourself, Clyde Gateway have been understanding their local market in Shawfield, and we'll be doing that for our geographical areas here.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I come to David Shearer?
Thank you, Chair. A very interesting report, Alison. I think it covers many areas. I understand that we do have to invest in buildings that we own to bring them up to a decent standard. And if that's not possible, look at alternatives, whether it's to sell it on or realise it's an asset. I was interested to hear your comments about the local plan coming up. I think that's absolutely vital, especially for the rural areas, to designate land which will be suitable for units, small, medium and large. And we have the M74 corridor running through Clydesdale that is ideally suited for distribution centres and other industrial activity along that corridor. And I would just press upon your colleagues in planning to look at Clydesdale when it's coming to the local plan, and look for sites for the small, medium and large potential in Clydesdale. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Alec Allison? I think you're stoning his thunder. Alec.
Yeah, he has to a greater extent than that. what I would say is just to register a disappointment in the consultants and the way they have looked at the rural area. I realise the report we've got here today is, I'll call it a review of what there was, so you can't add into what they haven't got. So I'm also pleased to hear your comments about you now looking at the items that have already been raised in the rural area and bringing that to the rural task force. That's very welcome. The key point in what David was saying is that currently NPF 4 has some very stringent rules about development in the rural area. And the importance of LDP 3 is that it can provide evidence and reasons for overcoming these roadblocks, if you like. So I think it's very important that you engage with that process to identify how we are going to improve the commercial activity in the rural area and achieve another NPF 4 objective, which is to raise the rural population. So I think there's a lot there that needs to be added into it, Alison. But thank you for the report, and I'm sure it's perfect for the other 3 areas in the council.
Okay, thank you, Alec. And could I come to Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I don't think we can underestimate the importance of this report. It really is quite a significant one. It's echoing, I think, developing strands we've been hearing about for a while, not least the failure of the market, really, to provide an adequate amount of industrial space to meet our demands. I hope we don't actually get into a rural-urban debate about this too far, because I think it's important to look at the South Lanarkshire context as a whole. What we're trying to do here is to kind of deal with a particular challenge that goes right across the area, rural and urban alike. Whilst there are particular rural issues involved in this, there's also, I think, a more general thing too. What this, I think, does provides us with is an opportunity to look at where we can take this forward, where we can meet the challenges of market failure. And I think we'll have to look very seriously just what budget we can provide into this context to support this particular direction of travel. It's hugely important if we're to maintain, if you like, South Lanarkshire's advances in terms of industrial economic development. And I hope that as it goes forward and as the reports come back, we'll be able to make something which is really quite significant in this context that'll make a bit of a difference. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And can I come to Eileen Logan?
I really wasn't going to say anything, then I changed my mind. It's nice to hear Councillor Brown saying, no, let's all just look at a South Lanarkshire context when it's all going one way to his area. And I'm going to go back to 1995 again, because I've been here that long. When we inherited the area that he represents now, there was nothing. And with a councillor called Chris Thompson, who really worked very, very hard on Clyde Gateway, on the Glasgow region side, and really did move to get things put in and in place. And I think it is important, and I understand completely. I have no issues about what goes where. Or, you never hear me complain about different areas getting anything. But I think you have to keep the rural context, and it's no a wee game of you get, I get, whatever. We are different, can't help that, that's just the way it is. Very distinctly different, and I think what David Shearer was saying is correct, that when we do look at things, then we have to start to look at it right across the board. But if it hadn't been for this council, and in particular the leader then and Chris Thompson, then we wouldn't have been as far advanced as we were, because they really, really did push to get things into the Cambuslang and particularly the Rutherglen area bounding on to Glasgow, because as you'll remember as well, it was derelict factories and ground that was it had chemicals in it and everything like that. So it has come on a lot. And I appreciate that, but I think also we have to seriously always consider the rural area.
Could I come to Maura Zack?
Yeah. You're right, the demand is by far outstripping supply, and the market is evolving out there just now, and we need to just move along with it. Just now we're a service economy, and I think we need to go back to manufacturing, and there's not really much there to offer just now in South Lanarkshire, and that's why there's a big need for this. I think the other part of this is the business case for this, because investment in this industrial units will bring a far better return as well, so it will help with our future balances as well. So I think there is a business argument as well for this.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just maybe bring this to a head, because I thought we'd got past the kind of the urban-rural thing. So can I maybe just come back to the point that was made earlier, that the report set out in section 4 is the findings of a study that we have asked to be produced. And a lot of the findings of that study are studies that we are findings that should not come as a surprise to us, because actually we've had previous studies that have been telling us that there's a problem here, and it becomes particularly acute. The reason, because of the age of industrial stocks, there are reasons why certain areas should be, on a dashboard, should be flashing red. In relation to the Clydesdale area, I think one of the findings of the study is that, well, we don't have the same issues with obsolescence. There is a lack of new sites coming forward. So to come back to the point that was made by David Shearer, that this then means we've got to have a serious think about what our local development plan produces in the way of sites coming forward for the Clydesdale area. And I agree entirely with the point about how we make the most of the M74 corridor. So I just want to make that point that I think, well, the study and the nature of these industrial stock issues is drawing your attention to the places where they're about to become obsolete. That is what the study has produced. That is a separate issue from our economic strategy and our wider ambitions for South Lanarkshire. Can I bring us back to the recommendations and ask if we could agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you. I'm going to come now to item 8, which is a report on Holy Cross High School, the full business case for the city deal from the Larkhall Community Growth Area, and similarly St Andrews and St Bride's High School, the full business case arising from the East Kilbride Community Growth Area. Alison Brown is going to speak to this report. Alison.
Thank you. This report sets out the full business cases for Holy Cross High School in Larkhall and St Andrews and St Bride's in East Kilbride, and advises of the next steps. Larkhall and East Kilbride are 2 of 4 community growth areas identified and supported by Glasgow City Region funding. The community growth areas comprise several education, transport and community infrastructure projects, which will be delivered over a time frame of up to 12 years and will in turn create capacity to accommodate the increase in population from house building of initially up to 2,600 new homes in East Kilbride and 1,700 new homes in Larkhall. The proposed extensions at Holy Cross High School and St Andrews and St Bride's extensions are 2 of the projects to be brought forward to full business case. The full business case for each project requires to be formally approved by the Member Authority Committee process, hence the report in front of you today, and thereafter approved by Glasgow City Region Chief Executives and Glasgow City Region Cabinet in February. In respect of Holy Cross, internal adaptations to the existing school have been identified that could provide additional teaching accommodation of up to 145 pupils. The proposed extension will further increase the planning capacity to 1,652 pupils. Adaptation works will continue until summer 2028, with the new build extension being complete spring-summer in 2028. In respect of St Andrews St Bride's High School, the school is currently operating more than 200 pupils over its planning capacity. Internal adaptations to the existing school have been identified that could provide additional teaching accommodation for up to 69 pupils, which will be completed for August next year. The proposed new build extension will further increase the planning capacity to 1,721 pupils when the extension is complete in late 2027, early 2028. The full business cases for each project are contained in Appendix 1 and 2. The funding package for the project is included in 6.2, including the City Deal funding and the associated developer contribution funding. Turning back to the recommendation, committee is asked to approve the full business case for Holy Cross High School and St Andrews and St Bride's High School, and that grant funding be sought in accordance with the City Deal grant distribution process, which requires the business case to be submitted for approval to Glasgow Chief Execs Committee, Chief Executives and Cabinet as set out in paragraph 3.7 be approved to allow these works to commence on site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. Can I ask if there are any questions, and can I come to Davy McLachlan?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Alison. I welcome the expansion at Holy Cross to accommodate the additional house building that's taking place. But, and I wonder if Kevin could consider this. At school leaving time, there's horrendous congestion around about the school area, at the roundabout, at the supermarket, and then at the end of the retail part there. It's really quite bad, and it's only going to get worse if the school's going to expand. And I just wonder if you could ask your colleagues in roads to consider if there's anything they can do to try and accommodate, to try and speed that up. I'm thinking maybe the traffic light sequence at the main junction, because it's a very limited amount that can go through at a time, and it just creates an absolute gridlock around the area. And it's compounded by the fact that, and I've raised this with the head teacher, that the pupils from the school tend to just act like a free-for-all. It's like a football match, and it comes out and they walk right up on top and across the top of the roundabout, and it's really quite dangerous. I'm surprised that nobody's been seriously hurt. So I just wonder, again, if you could ask colleagues in roads to consider what other improvements you might put in place here to accommodate that additional capacity. Thank you, Chair.
Kevin?
Yep. Thanks for the question, Councillor McLachlan. You know, that just given the geography of that area, we're quite restricted with options in terms of traffic flow and flow from the school. But with any expansion, you know, we'll consider the arrangements, you know, for access and egress, whether it's for the buses, the cars, or the pupils as well. So happy to pick that up with roads colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any other questions on the report? No. Don't see any questions. Could I draw us back to the recommendations and ask, are we agreed? Agreed. We're agreed, thank you very much. Could I come now to item 9, which is on the Pride in Place programme for Hamilton Town Centre, and Alison Brown is going to speak to this report. Alison.
Thank you. This report provides an update on the Pride in Place programme and sets out the timeline for activity. As previously reported in September 2025, the UK Government confirmed that 12 local authorities would benefit from Phase 2 of the Pride in Place programme, including South Lanarkshire, with the programme aiming to support the most in-need neighbourhoods by awarding up to 20 million over 10 years for each neighbourhood. In consultation with group leaders, 6 applications were submitted to the UK Government on the 14th of November, and on the 12th of December the Council was notified that Hamilton Town Centre, an anchor for Hamilton area, was identified as the neighbourhood within the South Lanarkshire area. UK Government guidance now requires the Council, in consultation with the MP, to appoint an independent chair for the Neighbourhood Board by the 31st of March this year. As such, and as advised to group leaders, the recruitment process commenced at the end of January, with expressions of interest being sought in writing to the Chief Executive by the 15th of February. Thereafter, a shortlisting process will be undertaken and the preferred candidate notified to the UK Government by the end of March. The fact sheet for the role of the chair is attached in Appendix 1, and Appendix 2 also includes the details of the role of the local authority. Given the timescales and the dates of the scheduled committee meetings, in order to meet the prescribed timescale by the UK Government, it is proposed that the authority for the appointment of the chair be delegated to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council and Imogen Walker MP. Following the appointment of the chair, the Neighbourhood Board will then be established by the chair in consultation with Imogen Walker. The board will then work with the wider community to establish which projects they want to prioritise and how they want to spend their funding. The deadline for finalising the board membership is the 17th of July. Board nominations will be advertised locally across the Hamilton area in due course. The Neighbourhood Board requires to submit a Hamilton Pride in Place plan to the UK Government by the 28th of November. An update report will be brought to future committee, which will include the governance arrangement around the Neighbourhood Board and the use of Pride in Place funding. The next steps and timescales are set out for clarity in paragraph 5.1. Turning us back to the recommendation, committee is asked to approve the following: that the award of the Pride in Place programme for Hamilton Town Centre, an anchor for the Hamilton area, be noted, that the process for the recruitment of an independent chair for the Hamilton Town Centre Neighbourhood Board as set out in paragraph 4.3 be approved, that authority for the appointment of the independent chair be delegated to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council and Imogen Walker MP, and that the process for establishing the Neighbourhood Board be noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? And can I come to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to Alison for the report. I would like to begin just by saying that, as we have said previously, any funding into South Lanarkshire is welcome, especially to good causes such as this, even though the funding in total isn't all that much if you consider the amount of time it's going to be spent over and our population share percentage in the UK. We've also spoken about previously, and we've agreed previously at this committee, the flawed process of the Pride in Place programme, how it bypasses local decision-making and has disregard for existing community planning structures. And I think we can see, even though the funding is welcome, we can see a bit of that throughout this paper. But there's things we can do now to address that and stick by that principle of local decision-making. So I would like to propose an amendment to this paper. It's in 3 parts. Happy to come back in and clarify any of them. But first of all, looking at recommendation 3, I will propose that it be altered to read that the authority for the appointment of the independent chair be delegated to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council, local ward councillors and Imogen Walker MP. So you'd be adding local ward councillors to be consulted on the appointment of the independent chair. Secondly, we get to the composition of the board. I note how in the papers it says the board will then be established by the chair in consultation with the MP. However, I do see, if you look at the UK Government's Pride in Place prospectus on their website, it does also state, and we've seen it in previous papers as well, that the board composition will include at least 1 ward councillor. And I think we had some concerns over that if the MP and the council or the council leader is going to be appointing this 1 ward councillor, a situation where you could get into is they just appoint their own party's councillor to that board. So to avoid that, the second part of the amendment would be that the composition of the board and the membership of the board must include all ward councillors. Thirdly, the UK Government's Pride in Place prospectus also says that the local authority and the local MP must approve the final board selection. I would also, as a third part to the amendment, say that that must also be done in consultation with all local ward councillors, similar to the rest of the amendment. I think this also relates to what we see in the paper in terms of the fact sheet in relation to the role and the job description of the independent chair, which does state that the chair must act as a public face in representing the board externally and bring figures of different political stripes together. So this amendment not only sticks by our principles of local decision making, but also aligns with those principles which we see here in terms of the Pride in Place programme itself. So I would like to propose that amendment to the committee.
Okay, thank you. I can see some people have been taking notes as to the content of that amendment. I'm just wanting to check if it is an amendment that is acceptable in the sense that, is that assuming that we have greater discretion over the composition of that board than actually exists? So bear with me a second. Right, okay, I'm being asked for a short recess to take advice, and it's also been drawn to my attention that we're over an hour and a quarter into the meeting. So perhaps I will use the recess to take advice on whether that would be a competent amendment, and then we can return for a discussion on it. Okay? Can I ask people to return to their seats? Okay, folks, I'm ready to restart the meeting. So to come back to the amendment that was suggested, so as anticipated, not all of what is there is within the Council's control because this is a government process. So if I come back to the 3 points, now I should say that this paper and approach was shared with all the political parties, and that is the approach that appears in the paper. The first suggestion was that when the Chief Executive, who we're delegating authority to make the decision here, consults with the Council Leader and Imogen Walker MP, who has a role in the process as set by government, that we also consults with the local ward members. Now, that's the bit that we are working out. How do we inform the delegation that the Chief Executive is seeking to make? I think we're happy to accept that and then involve the ward members at that stage. The other 2 points, however, relate to a process set out by the UK government that we would not be able to adjust. And if it's all right, I'm going to come to Ian Strachan to just talk through that. The one thing I will say is that from the point of view of the local authority and from the point of view of trying to retain the goodwill that there is towards £20 million of investment in Hamilton Town Centre, we will obviously continue to consult and involve the ward members. But Ian, do you want to just talk through that, and then I'll come back to Councillor Clark.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So firstly, just picking up, just having checked, when we're talking about ward members, in terms of the red line, this would be Ward 17. So the first point, pick up from Councillor Clark there, I guess what will be changing in the recommendations that was agreed is recommendation 3, so that the appointment of the independent chair, delegated chief executive in consultation with leader of the council, Imogen Walker MP, and the Ward 17 elected members. What Councillor Fagan's saying there is absolutely correct. Ultimately, this is the council's. This is the UK government process. It's not in our gift, and ultimately, as set out in the report there and at section 4.5, ultimately the appointment of so the board ultimately is then established by the chair in consultation with Imogen Walker MP. So from an officer perspective, what we would do is take to the chair once appointed about how the Ward 17 members might be consulted as part of that and their views taken forward, but ultimately a decision would be for the independent chair in consultation with Imogen Walker. But happy to take any questions.
Okay, can I come to Ross Clark?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for agreeing on the first part of the amendment. On the other parts, understand what people have been, yourself and Ian have been saying in terms of this the UK government process, but the UK government's information states on their prospectus that the local authority and the local MP must approve the final board selection. Now, that doesn't specify that it has to be the chief executive or the leader of the council. So then, is it that? Does that then not leave it up to us how the local authority is involved in that? And also on the point that neighbourhood boards must also include the relevant local MP and at least one ward councillor. Is that then not our decision on which ward councillors to then propose? So that then not being our gift to do?
So the composition of the board, I believe, is a matter for the new independent chair. I think we have the most influence over who the new independent chair is. And as I understand it, at that point, the independent chair, in consultation with the relevant parties, constitute their board. And I don't think at this stage, when it comes to understanding the size of the board and the range of partners and stakeholders that would sit around that board, that we are in a position just now to decide on its composition. I'm going to ask Ian just again to maybe respond to Ross Clark's question and just help me I think I've got that right, but just help me through this. No.
Thanks, Chair. You know, that is our understanding, and officers were at sessions that were arranged by the UK government around this, and ultimately it's seen as that this would be a condition of the grant funding.
If I can come back on that, if we are not able to decide what ward councillors at this point are members of the board, am I able to then change the amendment to read that we agree to nominate all 3 ward councillors to the board? And secondly, I need to come back on that point. The UK Government Information says the local authority and the local MP must approve the final board selection. So what about that part of the amendment?
Well, there's 2 things here. There's the amendment that we agree, and then there's the advice on the relevant parts that are competent. So I'm just going to, again, one more time, come back to try and get a view on the competence of the amendment, and then I'll come back and see if we can find a consensus. Right. So is there anything to add from Ian's point of view, or indeed from our engagement with government?
Councillor Clark, just to give some comfort on this, right, the intention here is to take to the board chair, right, who has a role in the nomination of the board, a proposal around the inclusion of the ward members. But the point that Ian's making is that that person has a role, as far as we can see from the processes it's mapped out, in agreeing the board members. So we can go as far in this as possible, but I can't speak on behalf of a board chair who isn't yet in place, right? But when that's done, I would take forward on your behalf that conversation about the board members, and the executive committee and the council will be kept up to date in terms of the appropriate process for getting the board in place and for its approval. Okay, so I can give you that assurance, Councillor Clark.
Okay. So, any more questions, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, these 2 other points do need clarified whether they are competent or not. First of all, whether at this point we can recommend that all 3 ward councillors will be appointed, and also the point on the approval of the final board selection, considering it does state the local authority, but doesn't specify how we carry that out. I do appreciate the assurances from Paul, but I feel like we need something written down here on those points if we are able to.
Okay, one last time, Ian, and then I'll try to bring this to a conclusion. Ian.
Thank you. So, on the basis of officers' understanding of the process as set out by the UK government, I don't believe it would be competent, because we can't nominate something if we don't think that would be accepted. And I think what we would be asking committee is to take the assurance that's been given, and that would be part of a consultation discussion process with the chair once appointed.
Okay, Ross, you've pressed your button again.
So I need to come back on that other point regarding the approval of the final board selection. I don't feel like we've got clarity on that point. I understand about recommending the 3 ward councillors, but as I said, it doesn't state how we carry out that approval as a local authority. So the question would be, are we able to ensure at this point that that approval would include consultation with ward councillors on the final board selection?
Right. I think we're talking about a process that is yet to be defined, as I understand it. But what you were asking is not something we could agree to yet, because the power will rest with the independent chair in consultation with the Member of Parliament to decide on the composition of the board. We know we have a role in that. And indeed, we know that from our discussions and from our officials' discussions with the Scotland Office that there are other people the Scotland Office and the UK Government would expect to have a role in that. That could include community planning partners, it could include people who are on the ground already in Hamilton Town Centre, it could include a wide range of people. We don't know simple things like how big or small does the independent chair envisage that this board should be. While we might, as a local authority, be developing some of our own ideas, ultimately it will be a decision for that chair. So on that basis, I also just think in terms of the sequencing of events, these seem to be discussions to come down. If I draw your attention to section 5, there are discussions to come down the line, and there are bits of the process that we unpick later in the year. The immediate issue we face is the process for appointing the independent chair. I'll just come there in a second. Are there any other questions or any other just feedback on that? Because I'm conscious there's a point here about competence, and then there's another point here about the intentions of the committee. So I'm not getting any other advice on that. Could I come then to Katie Loudon?
Thanks very much, Chair. Just want to start by agreeing with you. You said there yourself, Chair, we don't know simple things about this. And I completely agree with that. And I think it's an astounding statement to make, even though it's entirely accurate. And it's a very frustrating position that we're in with all of this. I just want to move away for a moment with what we can actually do here in committee if we're going to be told that parts of this amendment aren't competent. And come back to the reason that the amendment was made in the first place, because fundamentally this is about political influence and the approach that we're going to take to this in any way which we can influence it. So when we're talking about this ward, we've got 3 different political parties who represent constituents within this ward. But at the moment, the recommendations as they're written in the paper, it's only 2 members from one political party that would be making any decisions about it, that would either be on the board, that would be choosing a chair, and so on. So if we are limited in what we can do in committee today, Chair, maybe you could give a personal reassurance that you could use the personal and political influence that I would imagine that you would have with Ms Walker as part of being a member of the same political party, that you could ask that she looks at the principles which are set out for us in one of the appendices here, which says that the board should be bringing figures of different political stripes together. Because I really hope that that is the case and we don't end up with a situation where 1 out of 3 of the parties are represented in this board. That would be ridiculous, in my opinion.
Right. Okay. Can I come back to the actual paper itself? And on the point about political influence, can I just make the point that what we are here to discuss really, and what the process we're establishing, is how we allocate £20 million of investment into Hamilton Town Centre. And regardless of which party is investing that £20 million, I think that is good news for Hamilton. You've had an assurance from me already, and I think from the Chief Executive as well, that as far as the administration is concerned, we want to continue to consult with those local members, and we're happy to change the first of the recommendations to make that clear. The other recommendations don't sit within our scope, but I think that should satisfy everybody about our intention. And can I maybe just make one political point about this? Last year we passed a budget that was supported by 2 of the 3 political parties that represent that particular ward, that delivered £8 million of investment in Hamilton Town Centre. We are here to discuss £20 million of investment in Hamilton Town Centre from the UK government. The political point I would make is that there's something in the middle that's missing, and maybe it would be helpful if they were also willing to contribute to Hamilton Town Centre, and I think other people in the council have more influence there than me. See, to come back to the recommendations that are set out in the report, I appreciate the point about the composition of the neighbourhood board. We come to that later on in the process. Anyway, what we're here to discuss is the appointment of the independent chair, which is where we have the most influence, and a process has been set out. I'm happy to accept the amendment to the extent that I can to change that first recommendation, but I don't believe I'm in a position to accept the other 2 points. And if I were to bring this to a close, I think I'm simply going to move that paper as amended and in line with the advice that we've received. I have 2 more points and I will take them briefly. Katie Loudon.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, we keep hearing there's, as my colleague very clearly stated at the start of his contribution when Ross was beginning, we all have said previously in this chamber that we, of course, welcome any investment into Hamilton Town Centre. We're getting a bit frustrated by how it's been characterised as 20 million, and I can see that is reflected in some of the comments that have been coming from community members as well. We're talking over 2 years, which is very different from how it was first portrayed if we're talking about making political points. And there's also the fact that no other area in this council is receiving funding. We went through a process in good faith. MSPs representing various constituencies across the council went through that process in good faith, looking at where there were areas which needed investment, and that was all thrown out. We were presented with this option and it was take it or leave it. So I think it's right that we take a moment to recognise that frustration of other areas, other wards, other constituencies, that this investment is going to one place, and we've had very, very little influence in that and very little input. The reason I put my hand back up, Chair, was I had asked you a direct question. Can this committee get your direct personal assurance that you will speak to Ms Walker on this matter? And we're not just talking about my political party, or of course that's my vested interest. We're also talking about another political party who's sitting in this chamber as well. There are 3 political parties who represent this ward. So I was looking for your assurance that you would personally use your influence with Ms Walker, which I'm sure you have as a member of the same party, and speak to her about this issue. Thank you.
Well, can I say I work very well with Councillor with Imogen Walker, and I'm quite happy to work with her on the subject of the £20 million of investment that's coming to Hamilton, which, by the way, is £20 million more than the SNP government is putting into Hamilton. And on the subject, I'm happy to relay the conversation that has taken place today, and I've given an assurance around the consultation that we'll have with the local members. But I am not going to give Councillor Loudon any commitments around altering the composition of a neighbourhood board when it is not within our gift to decide the composition of that neighbourhood board. And indeed, there are a whole range of issues that should be taken into account. I dare say, in other contexts, Councillor Loudon will be telling us that politicians have far too much say, given the way that the SNP support hollowing out local government. So I'm not going to continue with the subject. We've got a proposition. I'm happy to accept a reasonable amendment, and I'm happy to welcome again the £20 million of investment in Hamilton, and indeed any other investment that any other government would wish to make in any part of South Lanarkshire, and of course to continue to oppose the underfunding of South Lanarkshire by the Scottish Government. Councillor Clark, you're my last point.
Thank you, Chair. To clarify on the third part of the amendment, which isn't necessarily about who we appoint in terms of the composition of the board, the UK Government explicitly says that we do have a role in final board selection, and that the local authority and the local MP must approve the final board selection. So are we saying it would not be competent at this stage to say how we carry out that approval? And if not, can you explain how that approval would be carried out?
I'm going to defer to Ian Strachan one more time as the monitoring officer, and then I'm going to try and bring this to a close.
Ultimately, it's the chair will appoint the board, and it's our understanding from the UK government that the membership of the board is the chair's decision.
Well, I have to say, I'm going to see to bring this to a close. Right, the points have been made. I'll bring the Chief Executive in just a second. Okay. We have had advice from our monitoring officer, and I'm going to defer to the advice of the monitoring officer for the purposes of dealing with this paper today. I'm also going to make the point that the recommendations that have come forward have already been shared with all the political parties because of the timescales that were involved, and no opposition was raised at any point until today. I'll come to the Chief Executive.
Again, just to try and give a bit of assurance, Councillor Clark, see if I go to page 78, it says that what's your role as a local authority? And this is the part that we're talking about, I think. It says, work with the local MP to approve the final board member selection, but proposed by the chair. Right, so there's a role there for the chair, and this is the point I was making earlier on. That's the chair's decision, and that's the point that Ian's making, is to propose a board. Now, again, to come back to what I was saying earlier, I have no doubt there will be a paperback at some point that deals with that through the council, and that's how we'll look to pick up that part later on. But that's going to be on a board that's proposed by the chair. And coming back to the point that you made in your amendment, in terms of trying to factor in places for those 3 ward members on the board, that's the part for which I can't speak for the chair at this point because the person isn't appointed. So they've got the role in proposing that board, and then there would be a paper here.
Okay. I don't see any other hands, and I am going to come to the recommendations with that first recommendation as amended, that we will also, the Chief Executive, in addition to consulting myself and Imogen Walker, will consult the board members. I'm happy to accept that as an amendment unless somebody wants to move, and for the paper then to be accepted as amended, unless somebody wants to move something else, in which case I'll ask the monitoring officer to make a final judgment on its competence. I'm not seeing anything else, so can we agree the paper as amended?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Can I come now to item 10, which is on the Scottish Government's consultation on the future of council tax, and ask Jackie Taylor to speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper is our proposed response to the consultation that the Scottish Government have run recently around council tax reform. Just under the background section, just a reminder to everyone around the way council tax works. The Scottish Government determine the structure of the tax, and that's really the bandings, and local councils set our band D rate, which brings in the income. The two main issues with the current system is noted at 3.3. Property values that are inherent within the system haven't been updated since 1991, and households in more valuable homes do pay more council tax, but not proportionately more. So this leads to council tax being considered a regressive tax. A more progressive tax would see a shift towards higher value properties paying more. So as I say, there's been no fundamental change or update to council tax since it was introduced 30 years ago. So the Scottish Government had commissioned a report from the Institute of Fiscal Studies around this, and 4 options have been put forward around reform of council tax. The 4 options that have been put forward within that study by the Institute of Fiscal Studies are detailed there at 3.6. So the first option is around a pure revaluation, but maintains the current 8-band structure of council tax. The other 3 options pick up different banding systems, 2 with 12 bands and a 4th option with 14 bands. The consultation was launched in October and closed at the end of January, but we have been given an extension to allow committee to consider our response. The key areas that were asked about in the consultation are detailed at 4.4 of the report on page 81. So the key areas are around updating the market reference point. So that's really reflecting current market values of properties within the council tax system. It's about exploring the options to revalue properties in the time periods that would be done. It's about introducing new banding structures to council tax at the top and bottom of the scale, and also to consider transitional protections to help households who would be affected by any reform. The proposed response is attached in full at Appendix 1 for your approval. I've summarised at 5.2 the main points that we've made in that response, but I would say at this point in time the details around how a new council tax system are limited. This is the first step in reform, and you can see in our response some of the points we're making just about needing that extra information before we could be certain about some things. So in terms of the points we're making within the response, we are supportive of council tax reform and are supporting a system that is more progressive as a tax. We are suggesting that in the space of how often revaluation should take place, that 5 years would be a balance between having accurate evaluations but also the cost of undertaking those revaluations. We have noted a preference for a revalued 14-band system. This is the most progressive of the 4 options that are presented. But we're also supportive of a transitional relief scheme to make sure that those households that are affected by increased charges are protected. A deferral scheme was asked about within the consultation. This is about where those council taxpayers would be able not to pay a change in council tax. We have suggested that there would have to be more consideration around eligibility criteria and also the extent to which those schemes support households affected. In relation to council tax reduction scheme, we are suggesting that should be expanded to support more low-income households, and that would be across all bands. and also a consideration that there should be a scheme that replicates council tax reduction scheme for water and sewerage charges. As part of the consultation, we were given space to add additional comments, and a summary of those have been detailed there at the bottom of page 81 at 5.3. So we have made the point that there could be significant financial implications for local authorities, but they are not yet explored in depth. So more detailed engagement would be required at the appropriate time around any proposals that were being taken forward. We are making the point around resourcing. We've mentioned around revaluations. We would be needing assurance that any costs associated with that would be funded, and also any costs associated with transitional relief schemes would also be provided. There's no timescale presented as part of the consultation, so obviously information around that would be required, and we have suggested that a simpler way of presenting key features of the option would be a positive way forward. And then to reiterate the final bullet there at the top of page 82, that the current lack of information around the details obviously has restricted our ability to provide a fully informed review. I have noted at 5.4, the modelling that's presented so far has been completed in the study on a revenue neutral basis across Scotland. So what that means is that the changes that could be put in place would still generate the same level of council tax across Scotland. Now this, of course, is a choice, and there could be an option where more council tax could be brought in, and that could support the provision of council services going forward. We know that we have seen a period of time where council tax levels have been frozen over the last 2 decades. However, it is an area where councils do have the flexibility to bring in more funds to support their budget pressures. We have made that point within the proposed response. So in terms of next steps at 5.5, Scottish Government are recognising that the consultation is an important part of the programme of works that they're working with COSLA on, and that this is just the first stage in a process to develop policy around this. All models are illustrative and no final decisions have yet been taken. So if I take you back to the recommendations, we're asking that the draft response to the consultation, which is in Appendix 1, be approved for us to submit to the Scottish Government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? And can I come to Norman Ray?
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question around in 5.2, the fourth point on council tax band property value thresholds should be set nationally to be the same across all council areas. I was wondering what the rationale for that was, because I suppose I could speculate on various possible reasons, but there's also, I suppose, arguments for the opposite in terms of giving councils more flexibility to whether that be to vary the thresholds to raise additional revenue or to rebalance how that revenue is drawn from different values of properties. So I was wondering what the reasoning behind that was.
The reasoning behind that is just to maintain the consistency that is currently there just now. You're right, local authorities do have the ability to influence the amount of council tax we bring in by setting our own rates. This is to I suppose, balance the position across Scotland around a scheme of council tax, while still allowing local authorities the ability to flex the amount that we can bring in through the setting locally of our own bands.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any, so can I draw us back to the recommendations and ask are we agreed? Agreed. Agreed. I'll come now to item 11, which is land and property transfers and disposals, and ask Stephen Gibson to speak to this report.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on a series of proposed land and property transactions. The background and details of the various areas of land can be found in sections 3 and 4, and I'd also draw your attention to appendices A and B. As mentioned in section 3.3, members will be aware that the details of land and property disposals which have potential for redevelopment are circulated in the property bulletin. Before doing that, we speak to resources to make sure we don't have any operational use across the council. So if I can take you to section 4.1, you can find the details of the first proposed transaction, and that's in relation to the former Red Deer Centre, which is located in Alberta Avenue in East Kilbride. Colleagues in housing have expressed an interest in this site for inclusion in the Council's new build housing programme. And section 4.2 confirms that the site is included in the Strategic Housing Investment Plan for 2026 to 2031, which was approved by the Housing and Technical Resource Committee on the 17th of December 2025. The plan indicates the potential for 30 new build houses on Alberta Avenue, although I need to point out this is subject to changes that just might arise through the planning process. Section 4.4 and Appendix B provide information about 6 small areas of land that are recommended for disposal. The report confirms that discussions have taken place with the holding resources and they've agreed to the proposed disposals subject to committee approval today. The financial implications are in section 6, and this confirms that subject to disposal, the Red Deer Centre will generate a capital receipt to the general fund, and the 6 disposals in Appendix B will generate minor capital receipts to the general fund and to the HRA. So if we can take you back to the recommendations in section 2, are that the land and property detailed in Appendix A is transferred between resources, and that land detailed in Appendix B is declared surplus. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report? Don't see any questions. Can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. I'll come now to item 12, which is an amendment to the membership of the Housing and Technical Resources Committee. Ian Strachan will speak to this item. Ian.
Thank you. Yeah, this is just a request from the SNP group proposing that Councillor Ferguson-Miller replace Councillor McCallum as a member of Housing and Tech Resources Committee, and Councillor Donnelly fill the vacancy as a substitute member. So just looking for approval to that today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions in that report? I don't see any. Can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. We're agreed. Come now to item 13, which is the acquisition of affordable homes at New Road in Cambuslang. Stephen Gibson is going to speak to this report. Stephen.
Yep, thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval to acquire 43 new homes at New Road, Cambuslang from Rail Homes for inclusion in the Council's housing stock. The background's in section 3, and this refers to the local housing strategy for 22 to 27, which was approved by the Housing and Technical Resource Committee in November 2022. In approving the plan, it was noted that the Council gave a commitment to actively seeking opportunities to develop housing across South Lanarkshire. In furtherance of this, section 3.4 advises that the Strategic Housing Investment Plan for 26 to 31 was approved by the Housing and Technical Resource Committee in December 25. It further advised that this plan included reference to the potential for new council houses proposed at New Road and Cambuslang. In terms of the proposal for this site, these can be found in section 4. Section 4.1 confirms that the Council issued a prior information notice in November 2023, and this sought engagement with developers and landowners for the delivery of new affordable housing. Realm Homes were one of the organisations that submitted a proposal in response to this notice, identifying land at New Road, Cambuslang as a potential development site. Section 4.2 sets out the proposed mix of house types and sizes. It confirms that, if approved today, the site at New Road will provide a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom terrace houses together with 1 and 2 bedroom flats. This section also confirms that the costs and financial proposals provided by Rail Homes have been assessed and they represent value for money for the Council. Section 4.3 summarises the key conditions. It proposes to enter into a development agreement with Realm Homes that will allow the Council to allow the construction of 43 affordable homes, and that's subject to Realm Homes obtaining planning permission and the Council receiving confirmation of grant through the Scottish Government's Housing Supply Programme. Section 4.4 notes that, subject to planning and funding, the Council will acquire the land in exchange for a land payment, and that the balance will be paid on completion of various stages in the construction cycle. The financial implications are in Section 6. Section 6.1 advises that, if approved, the completed properties will be funded from a combination of the HRA Capital Programme and Scottish Government grant. And just for completeness, Section 6.2 confirms that the funding for this development is in the capital programme that's been approved for 26 and 27. So if I can take you back to the recommendations, this comes with 3 recommendations: that the acquisition of the 43 completed affordable homes from Realm Homes for a total of £9.387 million at New Road, Cambuslang be approved, that the Executive Director for Housing and Technical Resources be given delegated authority to authorise the transaction and instruct legal services to conclude the transactions, and to note that the award of the negotiated works contract to Realm Homes for the construction of these 43 units will be secured in accordance with the Council's standing orders for contracts. Thanks very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. If there are any questions, could you indicate now, and I will come to Councillor Cowan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Stephen, for the report. Again, I say this every time we build or acquire new houses, new council stock, always very welcome. I do just have one question. From the plan, it looks to me as though there are 19 houses, sort of 2- and 3-bedroom properties, and 24 flats. And it's the flats that I want to talk about. I'm just wondering why all of the flats have stairwells as opposed to elevators. Now, I appreciate that there is a cost implication in putting a lift shaft in, and you know that it's more expensive, but there are only going to be 8 ground floor flats which would be fully accessible. These would be the only fully accessible properties out of 43, and I'm just wondering if perhaps it's worth a wee bit more investment to make all of the flats accessible. Obviously, the houses have internal stairs, so you know they wouldn't be accessible. But I'm sure everybody on their case workload has lots of people who have medical points. And the difficulty is that the majority of them are waiting for accessible properties. So I'm just thinking, rather than having 8 accessible properties in this development, with a wee bit of thought, we could perhaps have 24. I just wonder if that was considered, and if it hasn't been, if it could be added in at this late date. Thanks.
Yeah, happy to answer it. Thanks for the question. On the surface, it appears really logical. You're absolutely right. I don't have a figure in mind for the cost of a lift, but it's a huge cost to introduce a lift shaft. And it's not just about the lift shaft, it's about the space required for that lift shaft, which increases the floor plate of the property. And essentially what that would do is make it a very, very expensive property. So you're right, the capital cost is prohibitive, and it'd make it difficult for us to make it viable, retaining 19 units and also securing Scottish Government funding. So part of the answer is it's about capital, but part of it's also about wider need as well. In addition to the number of flats, we are building 19 family houses, and family housing is really, really in demand in that part of South Lanarkshire and Cambuslang. So to get that balance right of need and demand, and to get the package of viability correct, this is the best mix. This is what we believe to be the optimal mix. Building a lift would just really be cost prohibitive.
If I could just come back, could I just be assured that this is taken into consideration at every development, that you look at that you know, that we make as many properties accessible as possible?
Happy to consider that moving forward, but certainly in this case it's something we did consider, and it's about meeting need and demand in that particular area.
Great, thanks very much. Cheers.
I think I'm right to say we have targets around the number of new build that should be fully accessible, and this site probably exceeds it if those figures are correct. Is that right?
This site meets the target, yes, and I think across South Lanarkshire we do very well at meeting our targets as well.
Katie Loudon.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yep, thanks, Stephen, for the report. As Andrea was saying, it's always very welcome to hear about new housing, particularly as this housing is in my ward as well, which I'm delighted about. I suppose the question's related to Councillor Cowan's in a way, because it's about getting the mix right. As Stephen was saying, we get in terms of casework and people that come to us in that part of Cambuslang, it's very often people looking for accessible properties. It's very often people looking for big properties, like family housing, 3-bed plus. So I was a wee bit disappointed when I saw that out of the map that we've got there, it was only, I think it was 9 units that were down as 3-bed plus, and the rest were 2 and 1, so it was about sort of less than a quarter. Now, I know that there's other housing going in the Cairns site, which is obviously in the same ward and very close by, where I think just under half is 2-bed, and then again the rest is bigger. Just in terms of what I think I see, people looking for bigger housing, are we confident that we're getting the mix right for the demand that's in the area of that 3 and 4 beds housing?
Yeah, we put a lot of thought into need and demand for every development, so the answer is yes, we're confident. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Eileen Logan?
Thank you, Chair. It was just when I was listening to the comments and then about the monetary side of it and how it makes each development a wee bit dearer if you have to put in money. Given that there's a big push via the Scottish Government to get houses, and you see it all the time, people require, so they require houses of all sizes, but is there any, do we ever ask or do we ever get extra money? Because the point made was right. If you've got people who are maybe need wheelchairs or shelter, whatever it is that they need, but is there any extra that ever comes to maybe help us to, we put in that and the Scottish Government might put in something else? I just want.
Stephen?
Yeah, we never get enough money is just the short answer to it. We would take more money if we could get it, and that's part of the problem. The second part is that the amount of money we get per unit is always a struggle as well. Construction cost, or build cost inflation has gone up hugely over the last 5 to 10 years, and the amount of unit cost we get in terms of grant doesn't keep up with it. So if we get more grant, we can build more houses, that's for sure.
Okay, and final point, Andrea Cowan.
Yeah, just in reply to Councillor Logan, I was just going to say that a substantial amount of the money going into this development will be Scottish Government money that's provided through the affordable housing policy. Thanks.
Okay. Eileen.
I'm very pleased that Councillor Cowan can answer for the officers and answer to me. I understand that, but what I'm saying is if we wish to have the extras, does anybody give us the extras? That was all it was.
So I think what you say is if we build to a higher standard, are we funded to a higher standard? No. Or I think that is the question, or is there a consistent level of grant? So Stephen's got his microphone on again. Stephen.
Yeah, to answer that, the funding comes with very strict standards about space standards. So it's very, very difficult for us to exceed those standards and still secure the level of Scottish Government grant that we require. And there's some local authorities getting into trouble for building standards too big, to be honest with you.
Right, okay. Can I bring us back to the recommendations in the report and ask if we agreed?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you. Our final item is an item for noting, and this is a report on the South Lanarkshire Public Protection Strategy. And again, I think this is our first executive committee. I'm going to ask Anya McRae to speak to this report. Anya.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report presents the South Lanarkshire Public Protection Strategy covering the period 2025 to 2028. The overall aim of the public protection across South Lanarkshire is to help reduce harm to individuals across our community. The most important element of public protection agenda is about how agencies across South Lanarkshire work both strategically and operationally together. That's in recognition that it's pretty much everybody's business, and not one agency alone can address the complex issues that we face at the moment. Therefore, the attached strategy sets out, I suppose, the vision, the aims, and the multi-agency arrangements, and outlines how these will be delivered through our 8 public protection groups. These groups are summarised, obviously, on page 3 of your strategy document. I would like to just draw members' attention back to the recommendation that the public protection arrangements for South Lanarkshire are noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can I ask if there are any questions? And can I come to Maureen Chalmers?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Anya, and welcome to your new role. It's lovely to see you here. I just wanted to thank you for the report and also just to recognise, we don't often get a chance to recognise the increasingly complex and challenging work that's involved in keeping our public safe and protected. But I wanted to particularly note the visibility of given to violence against women and girls, which isn't always given within this just kind of a role across Scotland seeing this, it's not always there. So thank you for making sure that in South Lanarkshire we've got violence against women and girls right in the centre there. I just wanted to ask, and I don't want to put any pressure on you in a new role, but perhaps for the new year of elected members support and training, that we could maybe, I remember a few years ago we did a really good session, I think it was in here actually, where we had all the different public protection services, where we could get to know the people involved and what you were doing. So I'll leave that to you in terms of format and how it goes forward, but I'd really welcome an update on that so that we can really understand the complexity of what you're dealing with and the challenges, and get to know the officers a wee bit better too. That would be really helpful. But thanks again.
Okay, Anya?
Arrange that for the future. I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions, so can we agree to note the report? And we will come to item 15, urgent business. I have no items of urgent business, and so I will bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.